Good morning, everybody. Let's get this party started, right? Okay, good morning. It's the Wifey Wake Up podcast. And let's see if Instagram will cooperate with us today. And there it is. Yay. All right. Today, I think, is a great topic because I don't know. I just think it is. Are all women drama queens? I think we've all heard that comment, some kind of comment like that, right? And I'm just going to get right to it. You may be like me, and comments like that trigger you, right? And that's the hot word. That's a buzzword. That's a trigger word these days, to be triggered, right? And I don't know if we ever knew in the past how many times we could have been triggered since we didn't have that word. But the fact is I think that should be an announcement to ourselves to be aware, instead of just diving into our feelings and go, what is it that is triggering me? How specifically am I feeling triggered? Is to go, okay, those emotions told me something. Let's go deeper. So let's go deeper. Okay. So I know when something gets to me like that, I need to, first of all, just kind of put all emotion aside and go, okay, what is really going on here? And what is the real question? And maybe even, is it worth answering? But in this case, I am, yes, going to attempt to answer. And first of all, when you hear something that alerts you, be curious, right? So first of all, I'm going to break this apart. The word all, whenever you hear all, get suspicious. And also when there are grand categorizations like all women, or another hyperbolic phrase here is drama queens, right? This is not a question to have a reasonable discussion about. This is a question to get people having a heated debate about, and not even a reasonable, actual debate. So let's break it down. What I might hear from this statement, if I were to try to reasonably break it down and assume that the person was wanting to discuss, I might hear, wow, why are some women so overreactive? Why are so many women that I meet get caught up in their problems? They seem to never end, right? Here's some variations on what this person might actually be saying if they're trying to have a good conversation. Third, why can't women just get over an issue with a coworker and move on? Or why does my wife or girlfriend need to talk so much about her problems but doesn't want a solution? 5, why does my girlfriend or wife seem to need to rehash issues over and over and cannot put them to rest? 6, why does my girlfriend or wife blow things way out of proportion, or, as we've heard before, make mountains out of molehills? And I'm sure there are many more that I could be missing. And if there's another one that comes to mind, please write it in the comments. What are some other actual questions that might be in this hyperbolic question/statement? So I have a few stories to go along with this. And as always, the Wifey School, Wifey Wake Up is based on my 20 plus years of marriage with my husband, learning about men from that perspective. We've also run a business that is just naturally gravitates to predominantly being men in the precision machining department field, and just a number of experiences like that, training with men, just a number of things through life. And these are based upon, of course, my ahas in life as well. And so as I share these stories, they do have a reason, even though sometimes they may seem like they're going on a tangent. So in our relationship, my husband is the creative, more big picture thinker in the family. And I tend to be more like a list. Let's do it in this order. Let's do it in this fashion. I'll take a question like that hyperbolic statement, are all women drama queens? And I'll take it seriously, where he's like, you don't have to answer every question or consider every question one that is worth answering. And so I learn a lot from him and his definitely one of those situations where like opposites attract. And so one day, just to give an example, one day he commented, "Why is the sky blue?" Now note, I said commented. He didn't actually ask the question. It was more of a comment and actually more of a test. And then pretty quickly I started, explaining it's something to do with refraction and the refraction of water molecules. And, I don't remember all the details, but I could look it up. And he's like, that's not the point. And I say that because, I get so many interesting perspectives from him when we have conversation. And one of those is that, a question is not necessarily the question that's being asked. It's on the surface is not necessarily what's underneath it and being asked. So that's why I'm going to address what I assume are the more mature ways to asking a question, that assuming the person actually wants to have a conversation and find out. So they might be more so asking, why does my wife or girlfriend have to rehash problems so many times and discuss them, and may not even seem like she wants to look for a solution. Now, here's an answer for that. So here we go. Let's admit it. Women are generally more emotional than men, and a different type of emotional. It's not that men don't have emotions. They experience them and express them differently. But women in general do have more feeling. They feel more. And even statistically, we know, if you've heard about the big 5 traits, the personality traits that everybody has, but on a spectrum, and what makes up our unique personality and way of being. I'm giving a very layperson's definition of that, but in particular, what I'm talking about is neuroticism. And it sounds horrible. I know it sounds like, oh my God, you're calling all women neurotic. Well, technically, first of all, remember I warned about using the word all. Actually, no, I didn't. I skipped over that part. I did say be suspicious when someone says categorizes as all, and especially something like all women. I mean, let's be real. We're not even all women are women these days. So it's not a categorization that we can really use. So be suspicious, first of all, when people are using the word all. But as far as neuroticism, I know it's a hard word to hear, but I think, like I've said in previous podcasts, where I actually go into the definitions of words, we need to not just react to what we think a word means. Oftentimes we need to look it up, and it really pays to look it up. And so neuroticism, there are different definitions out there. It can be that women are more prone to experience sadness, moodiness, or emotional instability. It's not that men can't or don't. It's just that statistically, women are more likely to experience these emotions. Another definition that I'm getting from Very Well Mind is that on the high end, they experience a lot of stress. If they're high in neuroticism, worries about many different things, gets upset easily, experiences dramatic shifts in mood, feels anxious, struggles to bounce back after stressful events. So yeah, that's a difficult state of being to be in. And it's, again, I want to reiterate, this is on a sliding scale. It's not that there aren't men who experience neuroticism. It's just they typically end up being on the lower end of that scale and women on the higher end. There are other personality traits where men tend to be higher, let's just say, in disagreeableness, and that has its own drawbacks and benefits. So just keep that in mind, that this is not a men versus women thing. This is actually looking at the information. So here's something else. So this is, as I was contemplating how to explain this, at least from a woman's point of view, is that, of course, there are people in life in general who are always going to be at the far end of the spectrum, right? And if you imagine just even what I read you of neuroticism, someone who has a high amount of those traits, that's going to be a difficult state for the person themselves to live in, and also the people around them. And so that does exist. When it's on the high end of the spectrum, that leads to mood disorders, mental disorders, and so forth. So there are people who are highly dramatic, highly sentimental, emotional, just that high end of that spectrum. And so they are going to be the quintessential, right, drama queen. But no, that's the high end of the spectrum, right? Most people are not on that end of the spectrum. Sometimes when I am having a hard time grasping something or want to illustrate something more clearly, I try to put it in a totally different realm. And this is one of those cases, because I think I can understand it to a certain degree, because there's definitely been situations that I've had to hash and rehash and go over. And I know I've even blown them up more than what was actually going on. And I think there are a couple reasons for this from my own perspective. And I don't consider myself at all to be a drama queen. It's just a normal part of, for me as a woman, I think, processing. And thankfully, I have a husband who's very understanding, but I also really strive to balance that with, I just need to process, telling him I just need to process. Or when he does offer me advice, or is just like, it's time to change this, that I do listen and put that advice into action. And there are times where he has really tuned in when it's been a really traumatic event. Now, drama is different than trauma, and you might get drama out of trauma, but for me, it was a reaction to a very traumatic event, and he intuited, if not, I think, actually recognized that, yes, Tara needs to process through this, and it's not going to be processing by keeping silent. And he's been thankfully very available. And thankfully for me, I got to the point where I was just done with processing it and kind of tired of myself. And that was a nice state even for me to get to. Okay, so wrapping up here. Here's the comparison that I wanted to make. I would say especially for guys, but it can be a point of reflection for women. So I think the person who's on the very far end of the neuroticism scale, who is not able to function in a productive way in life, like it's really detracting from their life, their job, their relationships, it's always pulling on them. Like their situations in life always seem to be coming in the middle of things. And I would say, so over the last several years, all of us have gotten familiar with Zoom. We've probably all done a Zoom call, and you've probably even been in a rush and started a Zoom call on your phone and then went to your computer and tried to transfer over. Imagine a scenario kind of like that. You might have been FaceTiming, doing something different, but what I'm trying to illustrate is the situation where you have the same program going on one device, and then you open up another device and start that same program. And it usually goes like, can you hear me now? And then both devices are working. So you hear it once, and then it turns into that mad, nightmarish echoing of, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And then it just starts repeating. It gets louder and screechy and crazy. And I think this would be akin to the person who is so far on the neuroticism scale that what is a normal type of reaction, particularly for a woman, quickly turns into something that's almost uncontrollable. Compared to, let's just say, a woman who's maybe in the functional range of neuroticism, and does experience sadness from time to time, probably more anxiety, more reactive. They're generally more perceptive of their environments in the emotional sense. And it's a positive trait that we need as women, and particularly as caregivers, to pick up on the needs of other people. Where it is not helpful is when it turns inward a lot and we create these inner dialogues that keep repeating, hence the gain, the feedback in the previous example. But where it can be helpful is the comparison, the sound analogy is a woman who uses it functionally in life would be like she says it and it's more like an echo. And depending on the environment, the echo might come back a couple times. It comes back slower. It comes back in a different pitch. It comes back at a different pace. So she can pick up on it and hear hear it back, but process it differently. And she might decide to try it again, right? And that's much more manageable. And let's compare the analogy that I have for men is that men are very different. It's like they are in a room and they might hear, kind of like in this room, it's still a little echoey. I need to put up some sound stuff. You might hear some kind of feedback, but it's not the echo. It's not the echo. It's not repeating. And it's usually to the level that of their original expression. So I think that analogy could hopefully help men in particular who are thinking, oh my gosh, all these women are crazy. Is like, no, we just, thank God we're different and we process differently. And each one has its drawback, right? Let's say the analogy for a man, sometimes he actually needs to hear, he needs to hear that echo. He would need to hear the reverberation back and not just based on volume, right? Because it's loud and then all of a sudden I hear something back. It would need to be more complete. Where the contrast is maybe sometimes the woman needs to slow down the echo and just listen to the silence for a little bit. And then of course the extreme analogy was the gain, the feedback, and that person might need help, just like someone just turning one of the devices off, right? And learn how to do it themselves the next time. Because when you get caught in one of those states, I mean, I host a lot of webinars, do a lot of classes, and sometimes you can get kind of frozen in that state and forget, oh, I just need to turn one of these off or mute one of them. And that's where the help from another can really help. So the whole point is, first of all, break down the statement. If it's a reasonable question, a reasonable person, you think they're asking a reasonable question, engage, get curious, stay away from hyperbolic statements and hyperbolic comments, even, or grouping people as all. That's really, really rarely the case, especially these days. And also, just take in mind that analogy. I'd really be curious to hear your thoughts on this, women and men, because you're obviously going to have both very different perspectives. Do you feel that, and I just use rare women language, do you feel that really relates to you? And yeah, I'd be very curious to hear. And please like, subscribe, share. If you found this interesting or someone came to mind, please share it with them. And you guys have a wonderful day, right? This is all wifey school, wifey wake up. It is, of course, geared towards wifiness and relationships, but it's really all so we can live in a more harmonious world. There's always going to be stuff. I mean, that's an ideal state. Everybody's happy and lovey-dovey. Life is life. But if we can have a few solutions, hopefully, to make our days go a little bit easier, if I can do that in your life, that to me sounds wonderful. And so I hope this was helpful for you. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.